Hey everybody, I'm Joe, and around here we like to talk about monsters. Specifically, we talk about monsters for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, running them at the table and making interesting stories out of them. And today I want to talk about homebrewing, and I want to talk about the 3 different types of homebrewing that you will experience at your table. 3 different ways of creating monsters that you are going to present to your players so that you have really interesting fights and stories and game sessions. So here we go. When we are homebrewing, we're actually looking at finding the right intersection of 2 factors, which are the CR rating of the monster that we want and the setting that we are at. So the way that CR is supposed to work, and of course there's a lot of discussion, and we're going to discuss a lot how this actually works at the table and some shortcomings on it. But the way it's supposed to work is if you have a CR 5 monster, it is supposed to be a difficult challenge for a group of 4 5th level characters. That's the way that kind of works. It doesn't always work out that way, which is why we tend to put a CR rating monster that is higher than the level of our characters in front of them, but that's the idea. When we are choosing a monster to put in front of our players, we want to decide beforehand, is this going to be an easy encounter, a difficult encounter, or a deadly encounter? And that's deciding the difficulty, or the CR, the challenge rating. We also want to think about the setting. If our players are in the Feywild, it's a little bit strange to put an abomination or a fiend in front of them. And in the same way, if they are in the 9 Hells, it's a little bit strange to put a regular beast or a fey creature in front of them. So the type of monster and where your players are need to mesh in some way story-wise so that it makes some sense. And when you look at the back of monsters manuals, when you look at the back of Monsters of the Multiverse, it divides up the monsters into the areas or the locations where they're likely to be at. So this matters for story continuity. So we have 4 different possibilities. We have, if the challenge rating and the setting line up perfectly with where your characters are at, you can pick up a monster directly out of Monsters of the Multiverse or the Monster Manual and drop it in front of them, and you'll be fine. But there are many instances where that doesn't happen. The challenge rating might be wrong and the setting correct. The challenge rating might be correct and the setting might be wrong, or both of them might be misaligned from where your characters, your players are at that moment. So we're going to talk about these 3 situations. The first situation is, what if the setting is correct, but the challenge rating is wrong? So for instance, the Medusa is a particular favorite monster of mine. I've ran it at the table. I really enjoy it. It is a challenge rating 6 monster directly out of the Monster Manual. But what if your players are at a point where that is too easy or too hard for them? That is more likely than not to happen. What if you want to put a Medusa in front of level 3 characters? You can, and it would be a particularly deadly encounter unless you worked with the stat block. Or what if your players would wipe the floor with the challenge rating 6 Medusa and you needed to add capabilities to it? So in this instance, we restat the monster. We take its core mechanics, what it can do, and we add to them. So a Medusa still feels like a Medusa. We're just adding abilities to it, making the Medusa tougher. And this is not a difficult thing to do at all. We take a look at the kinds of mechanics it has, and we start working with it. And we'll do videos on restatting monsters as we go along. But in the instance that a monster is not the wrong choice, it just needs to be a little bit harder, there's only a very minimal amount of work that you have to do at the table. The second type of misalignment is, what if the challenge rating is correct, but the setting is wrong? So for instance, if your players are in the Feywild And the perfect monster for its abilities and for its challenge rating is an aboleth, let's say. Well, the aboleth is an abomination. It would be weird to just put it straight into the Feywild as is. In that instance, we do something called reskinning. And reskinning is just taking the stat block as it is and just changing the description. Now, this is the easiest form of homebrewing because all you have to do is change the description of the monster and you can run it right out of the book. And it's a lot of fun and it's interesting. It means that it opens up the monster manual and Monsters of the Multiverse, opens it up so that more monsters are available at any given point in your campaign. So feeling the freedom to do this is a really key thing. It's probably the easiest homebrewing to do. It takes the least amount of time, and it's also just a lot of fun because you can just imagine a redescription of a monster and just put it in front of your players. It's great. The third type of misalignment is if the challenge rating and the setting are wrong. In this instance, we homebrew from scratch. Homebrewing from scratch is not hard. It's basically a two-step process, and it's just setting and challenge rating. First, I like to decide the setting and the theme of the monster that I'll be homebrewing. So I'm going to think about where my players are, where they will encounter the monster, and what kind of a feel I want it to have. So for instance, I homebrewed a variation of the purple worm that was a sandworm that they ran into in the desert. And the theme was very much based off of sandworms we've seen in movies like Beetlejuice or in Dune, etc. Then I needed to create its ability contour. And this is just altering some challenge rating stats that are appropriate. And we'll go into how we do that in other videos. So you do both of these techniques, reskinning and restatting, and we just do both of them. But I always start with the reskinning, with the idea of how something looks, and I stat it after the fact so that it feels appropriate to the story that I'm building. So those are the three types of homebrewing that you're going to run into: restatting, reskinning, and truly building something from scratch. And even when we build something from scratch, it doesn't have to be difficult and it doesn't truly have to be from the ground up. I like working with templates, and we'll do some conversations about that. Hope this has been useful to figure out how you can start homebrewing some monsters of your own, and thanks for being here. I'll see you next time.